Hey everybody, it's Betsy from Story Drawing Skills. As you may know, I saw this video by Super Death Show called You Should Make a Webcomic, and it really convinced me that I needed to make a webcomic. To be more specific, a 100-panel webcomic made from scratch in 6 months, which was back in 2017. So obviously that was a fail, but we're going to turn that failure around into a progressing victory. So I will keep making this webcomic, maybe not in 6 months, but how about while I'm going back to school and working, and maybe it'll get done by the end of the year. Let's go for that.
So close, but not, because in this video I will be completing panels number 70 all the way up to panel number 85, and if you go from 85 to 100, there's also 15 panels left until this entire project is over. Oh my goodness, seems so close. But it's also been really slow going past couple of weeks. Has it been weeks? I think it's been weeks. Past couple of weeks doing these panels, because something I never ever considered as an obstacle to comic making happened, and that is I suddenly developed some kind of allergy. I have been living my entire life allergy free, and it's true that my sister does have specific allergies to milk and cat hair, and my dad has specific allergy triggers, particularly when it rains and when he mows the lawn. And so he takes precautionary measures like wearing a mask when he's mowing the lawn and stuff like that. So it was always really clear-cut allergies. So yeah, me having spent my whole life never ever being allergic to anything, suddenly one day I'm just, everything itches. My inner ears itch, my eyes itch, my nose itches. So I'm pretty sure that's not a cold, because I don't typically get itchiness with illness that way. So I thought maybe it was something from outside, because typically you hear about pollen and plant stuff, hay fever, it's got to be that. But when I went outside, my symptoms actually reduced. And when I particularly either sat at my desk in my room or I slept in my bed, obviously in my room, that's when it got just really bad. And I was just sneezing consecutively, and you can't draw if you have to stop and sneeze literally every 20 seconds. So that was bad. I started researching what could it be? I've been living with these same cats and dogs. I've been in the same house, the same area. What's going on here? And there was one article particularly on dust, which, yeah, okay, I probably don't dust as much as I should, particularly since I live out in the country, and we have, vineyards on all sides of us, which is just open dirt. And also there's, you might hear some of the hammering and construction going on right outside my window. So there's all kinds of sawdust and dust being kicked up by the construction over there as well. So that may have been the trigger. But yeah, like I said, it was just misery, absolute misery for weeks and weeks and weeks. So as I was trying to draw this, I was dealing with that. And also a couple of these panels, I ended up just completely redoing from the thumbnail, because it just wasn't fitting in with the flow, which is kind of one of my deal breakers. I think if anything is going to make me go back and do a panel, it's usually because it interrupts the flow of the story. I'm really big on that. So yeah, you'll see me do an entire panel sometimes and then completely erase it and start over. I was having a lot of trouble with this rock monster too, because I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but when I fill in the rock texture, it just gets so busy and so lost. So I've been trying to sporadically put in some rock texture, but then it doesn't really look like rock anymore. It just looks like a blob. So that was another lesson in that you have to do some preliminary drawings or model sheets for every character that's going to appear in your comic, unless you're just going to wing it like me and then regret it later. I was having trouble even just drawing the girls here. Something about Clarice's face in that one still bothers me. I feel like it's not looking like her, but I tried to follow all of her general characteristics of having, long nose, long face. Her nose points down, her eyes were a little bit more flat across the top eyelids, stuff like that. But yeah, that was rough. And then her hair also, I mean, I purposefully gave her this really kind of limp and straight hanging hair. But then when she was doing her fire, I'm figuring, well, heat causes the air to rise and all that, and so her hair should be flapping around. But then it got looking a little too luxurious, like she was in a shampoo commercial. So that was the thing, trying to go back and forth on that. And you may have noticed that I totally fudged my flame drawing skills and relied very, very heavily on special effects just to make my squiggly lines look like they were actually fire. So, yeah, again, if your comic that you're thinking about is going to include like elemental-based powers or even just magic effects of some sort, you might want to try to figure those out and practice drawing them in a couple of different situations that you think might happen in your comic, just so that you're not caught totally off guard like I was when it came to drawing. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I had planned that she was going to use fire for like ever. It's in the script, but I never actually practiced drawing fire, so we'll just kind of, we'll do that. There you go. Look at that. Awful. But, you just keep working at it until it at least conveys the story point of like, look, it's fire blasting in his face and he is unaffected, just like Pokemon. That attack was ineffective. So, yeah, there was that. And I also got a little sidetracked with, again, fire as a lighting source. And I went back and forth between, should I be putting these shadows in regard to the flame, being right there. But in my just day-to-day life, I've been noticing how much light just bounces and filters and, everything. I'm looking at just the morning light in particular that comes through my window and just bounces off my floor, and then I see it reflected on, the walls and the door and everything. And I'm thinking, if I were drawing that, I would assume that only one side of my dresser would be lit, but actually, the bottom is lit too because of that reflective light on the bottom. Here was another really difficult couple of panels. At first, I wanted the audience to be like in Kess's body, like opening her eyes. And I've never seen this really used that well in comics, so I don't know why I thought I could do it. So first I was sketching just like, her arm and her bangs like in the foreground, so you could get the feeling that, this is Kess's point of view, opening her eyes. And, she's laying on her side, so would it be tilted? It was just one of those ideas that was just like trying to be too clever for what the story called for. There was really no need for us to be like in her head in that way. So I think I draw this arm and then I finally give up and go, you know what? This isn't working. This isn't what I wanted it to be. So yeah, there was a lot of that this time where I was like following what I had and then erasing everything and then trying it again. But the good news is my final versions were usually the best versions. So I had no regrets in that respect. But, forgetting what costume details were like again, forgetting how to draw her face. She doesn't really look like Kess there either. So I think another note to myself for future comic tips and just best practices, just draw these characters every day. Even if it's not for the comic, just sketch their face in particular, because once their face doesn't really look like them, I think, I'm in more trouble than if, their hair doesn't look quite right, or if I forget a costume piece. I think I might have forgotten to draw Kess's bag more than once. I also know on maybe it was one of these panels, I was drawing with the pencil like I normally do, just, going away at it. And just in the back of my mind, I was thinking like, wow, this pencil isn't drawing as dark as I remember. And after I had drawn like a complete panel, I noticed that on my settings, the opacity was at like maybe 70 instead of 100. I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I notice that earlier? So it was a matter of deciding whether to go back and do that line art all over again or just let it be more faint than it usually is. And of course I went with the second option. Since I'm so close to finishing, there's really no reason to delay it any longer than it has to be. In fact, it is so close to the end, I am already finding my mind starting to wander into like, wow, what am I going to do as soon as this is done and I'm free of this project and now I can take all I've learned and put it into the next thing. I'm trying not to jump right back into another big project because obviously this one of only 100 panels has taken me 3 years. And I was even looking on Webtoons. Webtoons is like my go-to now for everything webcomic. And I was just doing kind of an estimate, like panel count on a typical chapter in a couple of the different Webtoons that I read. And the average was 75 panels per chapter. And that just knocked me for a loop because when I'm a reader, I feel like, oh gosh, that wasn't very much story to have been told in, this chapter. And then when you go back and you actually count the amount of panels and all the art and lettering and everything that has to be done, it's a 75 panels. That's almost my entire project right here done like every week. And that just really put things back into a more realistic perspective of before I jump right into my next comic, hey, you know what? It's almost October at the time that this is being recorded. Why don't I just, do an Inktober, maybe the, Hue November or D&D December. I mean, there's a couple of end of the year art challenges that are around that I could do. So before I go jumping straight back into another project, maybe let's just do that instead. I also thought, just because I'm an incredibly forgetful person and need to usually repeat my mistakes, 2 or 3 times before the lesson really sits in, that after the final video of panels 85 to 100, that I would go ahead and make a video of just like, dear future me, when you do your next project, remember these points that you learned during your first 100 panel comic, and just kind of go through that as a personal checklist, but also, maybe somebody out there also needs these kind of reminders and to just learn from someone else's mistakes and, really follow through with it. I mean, some of it sounds so common sense and so how could you not do that when you're doing your comic, particularly just things like, model sheets for your characters, and not even just doing the model sheets, but having them present and ready when you're drawing, because obviously these girls, they change a lot in appearance from the beginning of this comic until the end. Even the speech balloon style, oh my goodness, I don't know what I was thinking when I first started with that really awful speech balloon setup in the first chapter. And I don't know how it can't be said enough. Just practice pages, just concept pages. I think in animation terms, we used to do this thing at art school called proof of concept. And it was usually something like, okay, what would a screenshot from your animated film look like? Or, kind of what's the concept art of what this video game would look like? Something like that, where it just showed us like, what's it going to look like? And for comics, I think it's so not easy, but I mean, when you compare doing concept art to show what a video game will look like, which is going to be all, computer rendered and polygons and all things I don't even know about, coding, all that stuff. Comics are like the easiest thing to show a proof of concept, to show a test page, basically, that you can go ahead and do test pages of, your favorite parts of the story, or maybe even things of like how the characters, first met, and it might not appear in your final version, but it'll give you a chance to just work out some of the bugs of, what font are you going to use for your lettering, and what speech balloon style are you going to do. I've seen a lot of different speech balloon styles on Webtoons. Some of them I think are really fitting to the art style, and others I just want to take the letterer or the speech ballooner by the collar and just go like, what were you thinking? I mean, it disturbs me so much trying to read this comic with your design choices. So, but I'm real picky like that. Some people aren't nearly as picky as I am. So maybe it doesn't even matter. I don't know. It goes back to that thing of just like make what you want to read and make what you want to see. And I'm not sure what I wanted my speech balloons to do back in that first chapter when I was making them really sketchy and like splattery almost. I don't know what that was, but apparently at the time that's what I wanted to see. But yeah, now that it's almost done, I've got a couple of my friends going like, "What? You're doing a comic project? I didn't know that. Like, let me go read it." And one of the comments that I was particularly fond of was one of my friends said that the story was really easy to follow, which I'm like, yes, because that's one of the things I strive for. And also she liked that even though this is an entirely female cast, I mean, I guess except for the rock monster, I don't know if it has a particular gender or whatever. But it's a female cast, but they're not the super girly, like, magical girl team, and they're not like, Black Widow or La Femme Nikita or like, these really hardcore female protagonists either. They're just like normal people that are trying to deal with a rock monster, Like it wasn't, it just wasn't, I guess, a thing. Does that make sense? Like she's glad that it wasn't trying to be like, look, an all-female cast can be this. It was naturally part of the story. This is just who these characters are, and this is what they're doing. So I was also very pleased with that because I don't remember. I might have to go back and watch my old videos. Why I decided to make it an all-female cast? Because I could have very easily put in, a co-ed team, but I didn't. So I must have had some reason. But yeah, so I'm getting really close. Some feedback is coming in. Also some other feedback that I don't agree with, but I agree with the principle that people are free to give their opinion and their advice on what I should do. But I don't necessarily take it, particularly if I know that in their mind they're thinking of a different goal than what I am. So let's make a hypothetical situation. Let's say I'm going for muted colors. I know I'm not in this comic, but let's just say I'm going for muted colors. And then someone comes along and says, like, oh, your colors are kind of drab. Like, you should probably bump up the saturation next time you make a comic. Well, in their mind, they must like saturated colors, and they didn't know that the goal was to be, this muted. So I think you always have to take feedback with a little bit of, not caution, but try to understand what goal they have in mind when they're giving you this advice and see if it aligns with yours before you just take it blindly. Because if you take every piece of advice that's given to you, you're not really making your thing, are you? You're making everybody else's thing. And even worse, you're not even following just one person's vision. You're following like every single person's vision that comes along and gives you, oh, you should do this or you should try this. So yeah, you gotta stick to your guns sometimes. And you don't have to be mean about it, right? But you can just say like, oh, thanks for the advice, or, just not say anything. I mean, it's a free world out there with the internet, so there's a lot of communication and opinions being flung around. So just take what helps and ignore the rest. I think there's really no substitute though for going through the process yourself. Because again, how many times have you heard like, oh, it'd be a good idea to write a script, be a good idea to do your model sheets, be a good idea to do a test page, be a good idea to set a limit, make it short if it's your first project, those kind of things. And I didn't follow any of them because they seem so rudimentary that you kind of ignore it, in the same way that people say, oh, if you want to be healthier, maybe try exercising regularly and eating a healthy diet. And you go like, yeah, I know, everybody knows that. And then you end up like not doing it. So, you got to find ways. And I think that's the real challenge, honestly. It's not like trying to find out what you should be doing, because we all know what we should do. We should be drawing every day. We should be, working on our projects. We should be making time for resting as well as for working, as well as being playful and learning things. Yeah, we should. But how do we do that when we're all living different lives? We all have different responsibilities. We all have different constraints on our time. It's trying to find the how you can do it. That's really going to help you. And who can really tell you how to do that except for you? Right? Like, I have very particular needs for just what keeps me going to avoid burnout. And so someone might come along and say, like, wow, you play a lot of video games, or wow, you watch a lot of Korean TV. But if I were to just cut out those relaxation sessions and just be like full bore doing art all the time, trying to get better at digital painting, trying to learn, a second language, trying to do this, trying to do that, it's not going to reflect well in your creative process, I don't think. To try to just be, uber productive and just draw until this thing is done. There has to be that balance, and there has to be some kind of trade-off of when you're in active working mode and when you get to let your mind rest, because sometimes only when you're, just doing those daily habits of, washing your hair or folding laundry or washing dishes or whatever it is, that you'll suddenly get an idea. And if you don't let your brain, rest, you might never come to that idea. So that was a lot of random babbling, but yeah, that's kind of where I am on this project so far. Kind of want to give a shout out to the musical Hamilton, because I feel like having that soundtrack, I'd never seen Hamilton, when it first came out, like, I don't know, 7 years ago or so. I know it was a huge phenomenon and everything, but I just never had a chance to see the play. And I feel like when you just listen to the soundtrack, even though you get the nuts and bolts of the story, you don't get the full experience, right? So I just thought, someday they're going to film a production of it, and that's when I'll finally get to see Hamilton. And lo and behold, Disney Plus finally released Hamilton, and so even though they're a little bit pricey, my sister and I split, a month, so that just specifically so we could see Hamilton. And it really is amazing. It really deserves all of the praise and awards and just recognition that it got. It's a really, really fantastic piece of work. And the songs are just so catchy. So a lot of these panels that you're seeing me draw were drawn to the soundtrack of Hamilton. Just a little fun piece of trivia, I guess. And oh, look, Socorro's back. She didn't die. Shock? Probably not. I had so much trouble with this panel. There was something about the perspective of it, something about that dumb shoulder armor I gave her. I don't know. Things were just going so weird. And of course, this is my second, I think, pass at it. And I'm still not completely satisfied with it. But again, I'm so close to the end here. I can't be getting super, finicky and picky about things now that I'm so close to the end. So I ended up going with, I think once I reach like maybe 80% satisfaction, then, I leave it. So, yeah, I'm okay. I'm 80% satisfied with that. If I could do it again, I'd probably work on that perspective. I'd probably make sure it looked more like her. I would probably pick some better rock formations in the background. But, yeah, 80% satisfied is usually pretty good. I put in a little bit of a sunset sky. I have no idea how much time has passed, what time of day it is, but it just looked pretty good. So I'm just like, all right, we'll go with that. Whatever time of day that is now it. So as you can hear the ending theme music, we're getting to the end of today's session. As I mentioned before, there's only one more comic making vlog coming up, and then my ending video of just kind of like what I've learned over this whole experience, and hopefully that will be of help and entertainment to all of you. So please stay safe and yeah, keep on making stuff.